If you were one of those people who last year said that Trump was going to be a candidate of peace, Trump was going to keep us out of wars, Trump was going to exercise restraint on the world stage, then I have something I want to tell you. You're a dumbass. You're an idiot. You're a dum-dum. You are barely smart enough to breathe, it seems. If those were things that you believed, then I'm sorry, you're the biggest rube on the planet, because it was apparent in the president's first term that he did not exercise restraint whatsoever. It was apparent in his campaigns for president that his inclination is towards the domination of other countries through the use of military force, and that his main complaint with past iterations of American foreign policy isn't that we have been engaged in wars, it's that we didn't engage in wars. It's that we didn't engage in wars the way he thinks we ought to engage in wars, which is to take resources, right? He's kind of a old-fashioned imperialist in this regard, and he thought we should have invaded Iraq, for example, and taken the oil.
You brought up Iraq and something you said that could affect American troops in recent days. You said, we should have kept the oil, but okay, maybe we'll have another chance. What did you mean by that?
Well, we should have kept the oil when we got out. And you know, it's very interesting. Had we taken the oil, you wouldn't have ISIS, because they fuel themselves with the oil. That's where they got the money.
So you believe we can go in and take the oil?
We should have taken the oil. You wouldn't have ISIS if we took the oil.
And that was his complaint with the conduct of the Iraq War. Not that the war was somehow a bad idea, but that we should have gone in to take the oil. And so I just think that if you were one of these people whose belief was that electing this guy was going to bring restraint to the White House, and that, you know, electing his opponent would have led us to a war with Iran or something, I just think that you're an idiot. Beyond this assessment of the most credulous rubes on the planet, I think that it's worth considering that this invasion of Venezuela, this attack on Venezuela, is probably the beginning of a set of actions and not the end of one. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who for all intents and purposes is conducting American foreign policy in Latin America. Trump doesn't care. Hegseth just wants to blow things up. And Rubio really is the one behind the steering wheel here. Rubio, as the New York Times reported quite recently, sees Venezuela as a stepping stone to Cuba. He really wants to do regime change in Cuba. That's sort of, I think, his overriding goal. And I would say that he almost has a kind of reverse domino theory. So for those who don't know what the domino theory was, it was this Cold War idea that if one country fell to communism, others would follow. So the intervention in Korea was necessary to prevent South Korea from falling and preventing the dominoes to begin to go. Vietnam was necessary to prevent another domino, and so on and so forth. So that was the domino theory, an effort to prevent the spread of communism, because anywhere one country fell, others were guaranteed to follow.
And quite obviously, if Laos fell into communist hands, it would increase the danger along the northern frontiers of Thailand, would put additional pressure in Cambodia, and would put additional pressure in South Vietnam, which themselves would put additional pressure on Malaya. So I do accept the view that there is an interrelationship in these countries.
And I'd say that Rubio holds this sort of idea in reverse, meaning that if he thinks he can topple one kind of vaguely left-coded regime in Latin America, this is Venezuela, then that will make it easier to topple the next one. And I think his target is very clearly Cuba. And there are practical reasons here as well for targeting Venezuela first. Venezuela provides about half of Cuba's oil, provides it quite cheaply. Cuba already, under this embargo, already has many economic challenges, and there's a real chance that the regime would enter a spiral if, in addition to everything else, it lost cheap energy. And so taking out Venezuela, and hopefully from the perspective of Rubio, restricting the supply of oil to Cuba would then make it easier to go after Cuba. Now, I feel compelled to say here, as someone who was a teenager in the 2000s, in the aughts, that one of the theories of the Bush administration, of which this White House is kind of a bizarre farce of that administration, which itself was already kind of a farce of Reagan's administration, a farce on top of a farce. One of the theories of the Bush administration was that toppling Saddam would lead to regime change throughout the Middle East. That you could take out Saddam, and then you'd be positioned to take out Iran. Remember the axis of evil?
States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world.
North Korea, Iraq, and Iran was the next target. That this would produce a flowering of democracy in the Middle East. You go to Syria, you go to wherever. Saddam falls, the rest follow.
A new regime in Iraq would serve as a dramatic and inspiring example of freedom for other nations in the region.
What actually happened, as I'm sure everyone watching this knows, that the United States got stuck in a ruinous quagmire for well over a decade, and Iraq was left in chaos. Countless people were killed, and the region is far the worse off for it all. The dominoes didn't fall. Venezuela is not Iraq, Latin America is not the Middle East, but things are unpredictable. And if this is an effort at regime change, we don't really know what's going to come next. And there's a very good chance that what comes next is real instability. So there won't be dominoes falling. It'll just be the United States responsible for another huge mess. But the White House, full of very stupid and very arrogant people, certainly think that what comes next is a domino. And I would look at this from their perspective as the beginning of something. They will continue to try to engage in this campaign of regime change in Latin America. I think their national security strategic document has already said that they plan to reposition themselves, focus more on the Western Hemisphere. They see European democracies as in fact potential enemies of the United States. And so this is all in keeping with their larger strategic orientation. Do I think that this is all delusional? I do. Is it any less dangerous and deadly and potentially ruinous? No. And this attack, which more than likely killed Venezuelan civilians, will almost certainly live in infamy in the history of the United States, an example of us at our worst and most aggressive and most imperialist. And it's a real shame. Shameful day to be an American, I'd say. This doesn't mean Maduro was good. It just means that this action was shameful. And it's January 3rd, third day of the new year, and we're already here. Can't wait to see how the rest of 2026 unfolds if this is how we're starting it.